Hi and welcome to SCW, the wrestling channel here on YouTube.com. Thank you for choosing the channel and choosing the video. Please subscribe right now. Leave any comments in the comments section. Please like and share the video as well. Back for another round answering your questions in the wrestling community, taking questions off Twitter, Instagram, YouTube and much more, as well as Facebook on this one as well. You can follow me on all forms of social media platforms. On Twitter, SCW Wrestling Channel with the @SCW_Steve. Instagram is SCW The Wrestling Channel, as well as that on Facebook as well for you. And of course, you can always leave a question in the comment section of this video as well, and I will answer it. We'll always leave the hashtag AskSCW. I'll answer it on the next episode that I'll be doing, as I do one of these each and every week. So without further ado, let's get straight into the questions this week. Going to take the first question from the Wyatt Man podcast, asking why would WWE publish a list of available superstars on their website for each draft day and then draft in that same order for the live show? Very good question, and it felt like an obvious botch, didn't it, really, when we was watching the show on Friday Night SmackDown this past week on Fox. It was an awful show, an awful draft, and the way it was just done in general was the worst I've seen, really. I mean, I've always been a big fan of the draft. I was mega excited for it and felt proper let down. First off, the fact that only half of the superstars were available for one draft, and then we'll have the separate one for Raw. I prefer all the big stars. Who is going to be a big deal? Who is not? I mean, we didn't even get the world champions, for Raw and SmackDown sorted, and that was just very strange. We've got the SmackDown, the Raw Women's Championship sorted, but we still don't know the SmackDown Women's Championship either. So there's a lot of grey areas, and like you said, this list was released of the superstars available. I kind of feel like that there's been just a mistake made, quite simply. Maybe there was two sheets, one sheet with the actual order and one sheet was put on the website. I reckon the wrong sheet's been handed over. It is kind of hilarious when you think about it, because, like I said, it was a bad show, but it was funny bad as well, because we could all have a laugh at it on Twitter. But at the same time, you do look and think like maybe WWE kind of got wind of it, because after 2 rounds, it was exactly the same, and then they started to change it up slightly from round 3 and round 4. But yeah, it was not good, and I hope that we're not going to get the same mistake on Raw tonight. I really hope that they're going to try and salvage this in some way. Just to give us small details, I felt there was no real hype on everything going on. I felt that with Stephanie McMahon just announcing names like it was just a name was announced, there wasn't really a big deal made of each name mentioned. And although we see these really fake, boardroom excitement from these guys, I mean, I don't know if I'd celebrate getting the Lucha House Party. I'm just throwing it out there. The whole thing just felt a little bit flat, a little bit fake, and I don't know, even if they'd been like actors acting on behalf of the executives of each network, I would have rather just a bit of banter back and forth between two people trying to make their show better, rather than just a middle Stephanie McMahon saying, and Raw's now got this person, and SmackDown got this person. It just, for me, didn't connect, it didn't feel right, and I personally, the whole thing was a complete botch. Forget the website, forget the show. All of it was a mess, and I hope that it's not going to be a mess again this evening on Raw. Next question comes from Ricky Sycamore, good friend of the show here. We're halfway through the WWE draft now. Do you see any big surprises coming up on Raw for movers to smackers? Any surprise returns in your opinion? Fantastic question there, and of course there was a couple of surprises on SmackDown. I'm sure there's going to be a couple of surprises on Raw this evening. I'm trying to look at where the surprises could be. Were very interesting. I've got maybe 3 hunches of where I think they could come. An interesting one to do would be the World Champions, as to put the Universal Championship on SmackDown. It's been treated as the biggest championship in WWE since it was brought in, even though perhaps that hasn't been booked the best. It's been treated as the most important. To put that on SmackDown would almost make it feel like that it's joining on the A show, rather than being on what's now will be the B show, which is Raw. And to put the WWE Championship on Raw would be interesting, because it'd be the first time that's been there as well since the draft was brought back in 2016. So that would be a big surprise, I think, if that was to happen, especially as well as I think Brock Lesnar is best suited for what Fox want on SmackDown, that real athlete kind of feel, that prize fighter, former UFC champion as well. Now they've got Cain Velasquez as well there now. It feels like that is made for SmackDown. So I think if those champions were to change brands, that would be a big shock in itself. If 2 champions were on the same show as well, that would be a big shock as well. If you put Bayley on Raw, that would be, what would happen with the Women's Championship scenario, because then you'd have 2 champions on Raw, no champion on SmackDown. That would be interesting to see how they would book that. Would they do a champion versus champion, and then the SmackDown Championship gets vacated and put on SmackDown? Could be messy, but it could be a road that could go down. I think the Tag Team Championship as well could be on the same show. I have predicted, I did a full predictions video, in fact, which is still available to go and check out now. Thankfully, only a couple of names were not on the right show, so it's still kind of quite well valid put together if you wanted to go and check it out in full. But I do believe that Dolph Ziggler and Bobby Roode, or Robert Roode, I should say, will be moved to SmackDown this evening. I don't think that they're going to be on Raw for much longer. But of course, they're current Raw Tag Team Champions. But the reason I do believe this as well is I do believe they're going to lose the belts to the Viking Raiders in this evening's show. So I do expect that shake to happen as well. As for that, I'm not sure if there'll be many other movers and shakers of big surprises as such, but I think Charlotte Flair would be a surprise at this rate if she went to Raw. Mainly because of the fact that we have Sasha Banks on SmackDown. She's not had a program with Sasha for a number of years now, so they might want to explore that again. And of course, Charlotte did a lot of promotion work for SmackDown as well when it was going to go onto Fox. So I would be surprised if the Flair name at this stage was moved to Raw. But she did lose the SmackDown Women's Championship on SmackDown this past week to Bayley. With, of course, Bayley's new character and twist that she had there, which was absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I think that is maybe a small potential of a surprise that could happen, but I hope it doesn't. I hope that Charlotte does remain with SmackDown Live. Next question comes from Samuel Decius. Who would you like to see become the new Universal Champion? Well, Seth, of course, is still the champion, but it's going to matter which show he's going to be on after this evening, as we discussed in the last question. If he moves to SmackDown, maybe he'll continue his feud with The Fiend. I mean, a very strange scenario that kind of continued at the start of SmackDown, and now will it be quietly dropped, or will they have Raw versus SmackDown when the wild card is supposed to be dropped? I'm not sure how that's going to kind of work. So for me, really, I hope they kind of quietly just drop that feud and Seth continues on Raw, really. But I suppose it would work if Seth did come to SmackDown. But looking on the Raw side of things, there aren't fresh competitors for Seth Rollins to face. I think that Randy Orton would be a great choice for Universal Champion. Of course, he's been many times a World Champion, but has never been Universal Champion, so I would be a fan of that. I would love to see Seth change the character up and go heel, where then I think a face Kevin Owens would be a good shout as well. That could take that championship. Another name which I'm sure that, as you've asked the previous question on him before, Drew McIntyre would be a good shout as well. The only thing is that I want to see Drew built up now as a strong character again now, because I feel in 2019 they've dropped the ball with Drew McIntyre a little bit. They've not dropped it to the point where the guy's back to how he was before 3MB, but what I would say is that he currently at the moment is almost... He's just above mid-card, and mid-card is normally like opening act on a pay-per-view or a filler point of a pay-per-view these days. They need to really give Drew a strong push, and I think then he could go back into that Universal Championship picture. So that for right now is your strong contenders on Raw. For SmackDown, of course, you know, The Fiend would be the top choice for me. Roman Reigns would be on that brand as well, Braun Strowman. If I had to pick one from each brand, I will go for The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, because I think that would help rescue the character if he stays on Raw. I'm going to go Randy Orton as my personal preference, just because Randy Orton, I think, has had quite a strong 2019. I do think there's a chance he could turn face on Raw, but I do think that he would be a good fit right now. I think he could... You know, if he was booked correctly, I think he could be a good champion for the Universal Championship, and he would probably do a good job carrying the flag on for Raw right now. Next question comes from Facebook from our good friend George Jones. What was the positives and negatives of the Hell in a Cell result and the subsequent lack of The Fiend on Raw this week? Which, of course, now is last week, as we've got to Monday for recording this show. Yeah, God, where do we start? It was a mess from start to finish, and we had a really great week, and the time we did the podcast there about that premiere week, I was so positive about everything in wrestling. WWE, it felt like they turned the corners, everything was going to be good and right in the world, and then Hell in a Cell hit, which we knew deep down WWE hadn't really prepared for that well, but we thought the one match they had prepared for well enough was actually the Hell in a Cell match with The Fiend and Seth Rollins, and that was an absolute disaster from start to finish. There were some parts of it, even though they were bad, that I liked. I mean, I did have this small feeling where I kind of thought to myself that even though the lighting was out, it did kind of take the crowd out of the match a little bit, but I did kind of feel like it added like a horror movie-esque to the match. So I wasn't as against it as I have been, say, for the likes of Sin Cara in the past. But what I would say was that I don't know if it worked well enough, and maybe that was a mistake to make in hindsight, but I don't blame WWE for trying to do something different with that and to try and make that special. The real problem where I had with this match was the last 5-10 minutes of the pay-per-view at the ending, because of course, yeah, there is that feeling of maybe when Seth Rollins was hitting a number of curb stomps that, yeah, okay, the guy is making a comeback, and can he beat the Fiend? There was a real back and forth element where I was majorly invested in the match, and I thought maybe that was a good thing. But then, as we knew that the more curb stomps that were hit, the more weapons that were used, we knew here that the Fiend was going to be put down, and it was obvious that Seth Rollins was not going to lose the Universal Championship, and that's where the biggest mistake of this came into altogether. Because for me, I said many weeks on this channel, don't book the match if Bray Wyatt is not walking out as the Universal Champion. If you're going to put the Fiend that soon in the title picture, he has to win it. And I said previously as well, with a mask like that, I do not see him being the face of the company, which really had me worried that this was not going to work and that we were going to be all bitterly disappointed after the pay-per-view. It was a disaster show the way they did it. The referee's stoppage was a really weak finish and a way to go of like, Seth, this isn't your character, this isn't going to work, this isn't, you know, this isn't you, and the fact that when he used the sledgehammer, and bear in mind there was a massive sort of hammer used earlier in the match, almost like a mallet-like that Bray Wyatt used, which has been used previously for Rambling Rabbit on the Firefly Funhouse. You look at this and say, well, what was wrong with this other sledgehammer that was used? It just didn't add up. The whole thing for me had flaws in it from start to finish. Rumours were that the original finish of this was that Bray Wyatt was going to be thrown off the Hell in a Cell and that he was going to be unable to continue, which for me, I'm sure people now would say I would have preferred that finish of the two. For me, it's still a weak finish. It just didn't work. At this point, everyone was like complaining of how things were done on Raw, where the Fiend managed to make himself disappear. I think if you really had to do it, that was the best way to do it, even though no, the whole thing was just a mess. I mean, there's a reason why the crowd was showing restart the match, call an audible, get it going again. I'm sure people were shouting refund. There was definitely shouts of AEW. And, you know, from a pay-per-view standpoint, this is going to be remembered as one of the worst pay-per-view finishes of all time. I mean, we've got some real big ones up there from previous times. I mean, Backlash 2018 was a dreadful pay-per-view from the second match to the finish, and fans really crapped over Roman Reigns and Samoa Joe, which will be remembered. I think even 10-15 years from now. You go back to like times in the 90s. I mean, you look at Starrcade 97. I believe it was if I've got the year right, I believe it was Sting and Hogan. That was a complete train wreck as well. So that there aren't previous ones. Halloween Havoc, I believe 98, Ultimate Warrior Hogan. There are a lot of pay-per-views where you look back and go, I remember that for all the wrong reasons. And sadly, they're going to do the same with this one. And I think that's what's a crying shame here, because they had a chance to really, really get something off the ground. They had a special character in The Fiend. And they arguably have ruined 6-7 months of hard work in that character, developing it, getting people behind it, buying into it, praying that he's going to win. And then you've also killed Seth Rollins as a babyface. You've killed the curb stomp. You've actually killed the Hell in a Cell. And to think back, and we talk about positives of Hell in a Cell, you look back to the first two matches of the night, which were very good. That first one was a Hell in a Cell match with Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks. Was incredible from start to finish. One of the best Hell in a Cell matches I've seen for a long time, actually. I was really impressed with that Cell match. And to look back and think then that the main event they've done that, I still think they've killed that gimmick pay-per-view. And probably, I don't actually want to hear the words Hell in a Cell for a long time now, because of the fact that the last 2 years have finished on a no contest. I mean, the year before, I think, was something like a DQ finish or a no contest with Brock Lesnar, destroying Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman. This year, they've killed characters by just booking, and that was dreadful. Going on to Raw, you mentioned about Raw and the lack of it. I think WWE just looked and went, we balls this up, and we are just going to hide it for now. Just show like the video of what happened the night before, and just quietly try and put it under the carpet. Yeah, okay, that's not the best way to go about it. I think they should have got head on, and they should have probably confronted the problem. At the same time, the belief was that Bray Wyatt had an injury as well coming from that pay-per-view, and I think they wanted to keep him off of the TV a little bit, although I do believe he had a dark segment after Raw, which, I mean, the mandible claw doesn't involve taking too many bumps. It's the whole thing for me was a mess, and I guess WWE wanted to protect themselves, but they didn't protect themselves for too long because the Fiend was involved then on SmackDown with Seth Rollins on Friday. And as I said to you now, the Fiend's been booked on SmackDown. I predict Seth Rollins will be on Raw. Where does this go from here? I hope they quietly drop it because I think it's just going to get messy otherwise. And it's messy already, and they've killed a lot of things here. It's going to take a lot of work to get people to be invested the same as what they were before. And with the soundness of being negative, there wasn't so much positive to say about when it comes to the Fiend and Seth Rollins. Raw in general, for me, was not a positive at all this week. This last week, there was a lot of showcase matches and a very filler show. Sometimes you need to have filler shows, but the problem is with 3-hour filler shows, it's a long time to be patient for, and especially when you're looking out for a fallout from a pay-per-view, your arguably two biggest superstars, because they were featured in the main event the night before, to not get anything from there makes that patience wear very thin, and I can understand why there was a lot of backlash with both the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view and with Raw this past week. Next question comes from Austin Whitley. How far do you see Bray going on SmackDown with Roman and Brock likely being at the top? Well, of course, as we've speculated in this episode so far, that whoever the champion is likely to be Brock Lesnar. Yes, Roman Reigns is going to be at the top as well. How will Cain Velasquez be? He has reportedly signed a deal with WWE, and he's not going to be kept on the sidelines. He'll probably be a heavy featured moment, prominent role on SmackDown as well. Where is Bray going to fit in? I kind of wonder if WWE have booked themselves into a corner again here, because Bray now needs to be strong. After this, they can't just completely kill the character. Otherwise, he's going to be, he's going to be like Vladimir Kozlov about a decade ago and dancing along with somebody else. Remember Tensai when he was booked really strongly going towards the main event, completely killed the momentum, killed the push, went down. He was dancing with Brodus Clay. This is very, very dangerous. Could go one way or another with Bray Wyatt at this point. You need to really keep him strong. Is he going to destroy the Lucha House Party? It works for a week. It's not going to work long term. I think there's some great feuds there. I mean, Braun Strowman's on SmackDown as well. There's some great feuds there for Bray. I even suggest maybe that Braun Strowman would be the best feud to go to begin with again, because a big guy and someone who hasn't been champion, someone who's currently being booked like the Big Show 2.0, who's going to probably lose to Tyson Fury at Crown Jewel, which is going to really not do the credibility of wrestling any good by having a boxer beat a wrestler. You're in our world, so the boxer shouldn't really be winning in a wrestling world. But of course, this is sports entertainment, and the way sports entertainment does it, they always put the boxer over because the boxer's undefeated and the WWE superstar isn't. So, there's no way that Braun Strowman, unless they want to protect both guys, do like a double disqualification, which again is another mess of a finish on a pay-per-view. I think the only blessing would be that it's on Crown Jewel, where probably nothing against those events, but I mean the expectation normally from a lot of fans is quite low anyway. I mean, you only have to look at the Undertaker Goldberg match this year. We're not expecting too much when it comes from these shows. So a lot of legends come back, or these special people come in for these shows. So a lot of people are not expecting much. But to go back to your question of Bray Wyatt, the sky should be the limit for Bray Wyatt. He should be top of the card or flirting towards it. The problem is that Bray Wyatt, like you say, is he going to go over Roman Reigns? He couldn't beat Seth Rollins. Is he going to go over Brock Lesnar? I'm not so sure now. If you'd have asked me 1 week, 2 weeks ago, I had Bray being the guy who would, as he's been thrown in this picture, to be the man and to be a guy who couldn't be beaten, and that the dream matches there could have been with Roman Reigns or Brock Lesnar. For me, Brock Lesnar and The Fiend at WrestleMania would have been incredible, because, I mean, Brock's not going to be frightened like Seth Rollins was of The Fiend. Roman Reigns is too much of a superhero as well. That's not going to happen. So I'm interested in seeing how they're going to do this with The Fiend. I mean, Braun Strowman's not going to back down either. This guy is supposed to be menacing, frightening. Not only is he supposed to be someone that is supposed to not suffer with a lot of pain and comes back and defeats everybody and victimizes them, he's now going to be in the same category with these guys who do the same. And if they're not going to have him beat Seth Rollins, well, is he going to beat these other guys? I'm not so sure. I'm hoping it's going to work out well for Bray on SmackDown because, like I said, there's some fresh matches and some good matches and programs they can make. It's just how they're written, and I think that's the problem at the moment. The fear is the creative. It's not the matches themselves. Bray has got something special there. Got a great character, a great gimmick, something very fresh, and they should run with it. Just got to hope creative can make that SmackDown special because that roster has got a talent. I think they're currently winning the draft. If there is a draft to be won, I think SmackDown currently is winning it. But yeah, it all comes down to that thing, creative. Next question comes from James Steele, and it's a change of topic for you here. With a roster including superstars such as Nick Aldis, Eli Drake, Damien Sandow, James Storm, and Mr. Anderson, do you think Billy Corgan's NWA could establish themselves as an old school alternative? Great question. I have been recommended that I should be checking out NWA. Now, must admit, I watched the Crockett Cup earlier this year, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good show, and that's the thing. I found it very old school. It was a very old school alternative. The thing is when you're looking for alternative these days, AEW does kind of stand out as a true alternative because it almost has that modern feel, big arenas, and has that ability to compete with WWE. When you look at NWA, it does feel like, you know, when I watched the Crockett Cup, it didn't look like a big setting and a big stage of where it was set and hosted, but the show itself and the quality was good. So if you can look past the idea that this isn't going to be in front of 10, 20,000 people each time they do a show, or 5,000 people, it's going to be maybe in front of maybe 500 people to 1,000 people. Now, I could be wrong here, but that's what I believe would probably be a likely attendance for these sort of shows. If you can get over that and perhaps the value going into it, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it will be good. I mean, there's some superstars there that would definitely attract eyeballs to its product. And like you say, an old school feel is quite nice. I mean, you know, I do enjoy going and watching some of the old stuff on the WWE Network. I've watched a lot of the NWA from the 80s over this year, and I've also been watching very early WCW days as well. I would be quite intrigued to see an old school throwback to how things were back in the day. People working those styles and working those types of matches. I think that could be interesting to watch. So yeah, and like you said, there's some good talent there. Whether it would be enough to get a big audience to come and watch it, I'm not so sure. But I definitely think that there is enough there to definitely check out. And like I say, I've been recommended to come and check this out. That it was a good show. Yeah, I think I will check it out. I'd like to know what people's feelings are in the comments. Is NWA on your radar? Is it something that you would like to watch and check out in the wrestling world? It certainly has definitely got some superstars there which are interesting to check out. And I must admit, I have been watching some of their work as well when they've been involved with Ring of Honor this year as well. So I think they've got some stuff to offer. So let's see. I mean, maybe there could be a crossover with those two brands actually bring to the NWA show as well. And that would also be interesting to see. Next question comes from Pro Wrestling Talk. Do you see Impact Wrestling surviving now AEW exists? Well, it's a good question. Impact Wrestling has always survived. There's been many times we thought it's going to go under probably over the last 10 years. It has always found a way to survive. Always, or I say 10 years, but definitely the last perhaps 6 or 7. And it has always found a new way, found a new television station, found new ownership. It's always managed to continue to keep going. And I expect Impact Wrestling is never going to be the number 2 now when it comes to pro wrestling. Certainly not for a long time if they're going to. But they've got a niche of top talent wrestlers that are working for them. They've got some good writers there, some good storylines, and they usually always deliver when it comes to a pay-per-view. I don't remember the last pay-per-view now that I've seen from Impact Wrestling where I was disappointed. I think perhaps maybe the weakest was probably Homecoming at the start of the year. But saying that, I mean, the bar is set pretty high on an Impact Wrestling pay-per-view. So, I mean, Bound for Glory is this Sunday. I will be doing a predictions video this week, and I hope you guys will check it out. And I hope you check the pay-per-view out as well, because Impact Wrestling finds a way to keep going, and they put on a good product. I think that the best they can hope for is perhaps maybe be the number 3, the number 4 in the US market. But even though they are perhaps at a smaller scale now to perhaps what they intended to be when they originally got going, Impact Wrestling will continue. And like I say, they've got great stars there. Brian Cage, Sami Callihan, Tessa Blanchard. They've got a mega talented roster. For me, I think they've got one of the strongest women's divisions as well. There is enough there to keep die-hard wrestling fans invested in what they're doing. And yeah, I think they'll keep going. AEW perhaps maybe take some of the talent. Then I think that's the problem Impact Wrestling will face, is that when talents' contracts come up, you've seen with LAX, for example, and a couple of other talents, they move on and they go to WWE or they go to now AEW because that is perhaps a more attractive proposition. But there are always aspiring wrestlers that can build and make a name and they can start themselves in Impact Wrestling. Perhaps one to keep an eye on right now, I think, is Ace Austin. I think that I wasn't a fan of his when he started. I'm still growing into it, but they are slowly building him up on that roster. He's currently got a feud with Eddie Edwards going on. And yeah, they've got the ability to make stars as well. And they work with Mexico from time to time as well. So they'll be fine. Impact Wrestling will keep going. There's nothing to worry about there. Next question comes from Daniel Decius. What is your favourite moment of Rhino in wrestling? Well, as a big fan of the Man Beast and always seeing a gore, there have been a few that have come to mind. Rhino, fantastic. I loved him particularly in the ECW days. He was around 2000, 2001, one of my favourite wrestlers in pro wrestling. I really enjoyed his times in ECW. He used to destroy Spike Dudley. Spike Dudley was always a great whipping boy anyway in ECW, but his matches with Rob Van Dam was my favourite in ECW. Rhino was my second, and them two had some great matches in the, I believe, the year 2000 in ECW, so those were particular favourite moments. In WWE, of course, his debut when he got involved with the ladder match at WrestleMania 17 was a special moment. I really enjoyed his Hardcore Championship match with Raven, which I believe was on a pay-per-view. I believe it was Backlash, actually, in 2001, but could be wrong again. I've not done my network checkups, as you can probably tell, as I've come onto here. And, of course, as well, the gore with Chris Jericho through the SmackDown stage. Fantastic moments. Sadly, his tag team partnership with Heath Slater isn't up there for me, but you know, there have been some great moments with Rhino over the years, and definitely, if I had to pick one, I will go with his matches with Rob Van Dam, particularly in ECW. Those were particular favourites of mine. But it would be interesting to know your favourites in the comments below with the Man Beast. Our last question today comes from George Jones once again. He wants to know, what are the positives and negatives of the current WWE product, and how does the product compare to the Attitude Era? Interesting question once again here for us now. And yeah, I mean, to look really now compared to then, the positives back then were creative. The positives now compared to then is match quality. The superstars now have got so much more quality and they've got the ability to do so many things that superstars back then couldn't even dream of doing. You didn't have a Ricochet back in the Attitude Era. But did we want one? I don't know. I mean, the thing is, the Attitude Era had some really, really great creative moments, but we also had to sit through some really bad filler as well. I mean, if we only have to mention the words Naked Midian, and that's enough to put everybody off straight away. We don't have that anymore. We have a mid-card of people like Shinsuke Nakamura, Sami Zayn, who can put on great matches, but they just don't have the creative direction. And I think that's where the negative stems in today's product. But if you look at it from a positive standpoint, I mean, like we said, we haven't got to sit through some of maybe the awful things that perhaps maybe we had to sit through back then. I mean, we had some really bad filler matches back then, but we also had great stories that went behind some of those bad filler matches. So I think that you look at it, it goes hand in hand. And there are great moments from both the Attitude Era as well as some negatives. We've got both. We have great moments now. I think the problem is that the difference also between then and now, when you look in the Attitude Era, SmackDown started in 1999, and properly in 1999 was actually late 1999 as well. I think it was like September, October time, like the premiere stuff like we have now. The Attitude Era stopped technically in 2001, so WWE at its high point only had to write a couple of hours of TV every week, and I think that is another thing that's a problem with today's market, is that if you look at the negative, there is so much content that needs to be written week in and week out that we get positive stuff, but it gets overlooked because we have to watch so much every week. We've got, 2 hours of Raw, or 3 hours of Raw, sorry, 2 hours of SmackDown, now 2 hours of NXT, NXT UK, AEW's chimed in as well. You know, it's just a lot to take in right now. And you could argue and say, yeah, we had WCW, but they were the competitor. So if we're looking at WWE at that standpoint, then they didn't have to do as much work as what they do now. And if their show was a 2-hour show every week and they took the best bits of everything going on and threw it into one show, maybe we would turn around going, this is the best era we've ever had, because of the fact that we have people who can put on these amazing matches, and we've got just the best bits of those storylines all thrown into one. But then going back to your early question, we could then get Hell in a Cell. So, you know, there's lots of different ways around it. But for me, creative is a big part of it, of the negative of today, because of the fact that we don't always get the correct booking decisions. The storytelling isn't as good, and character development isn't encouraged as much. Maybe because of the fact back then we had a lot more leeway with things you could do. Val Venus, the porn star. We had the Godfather, the pimp. You know, I mean, they changed to Right to Censor, which of course had probably the worst theme music of all time, but yet was in one way was a great gimmick when you look back at it. It was annoying at the time, but you look back at it, it was a genius gimmick when you think of it in real terms. Where you look today and we think everyone is just themselves, but is it believable? It's a PG product as well. Would you get away with those sort of characters now? We're starting to get a more raunchy WWE product again. We can see the angles they're trying to do with Lashley, Rusev and Lana. The thing is what fans want as well these days. They're different times in the world. You know, back then, you know, the women's division wasn't treated as something of any importance. Women were just in bikinis. Today, they're a big focal point of wrestling. They're fresh. And I think it's a very positive thing, because you can see the talent pool and the ability that they could have with storylines as well, because the storylines that could be made now that would be very fresh because they were not done back then. There's so many different things that have had the ability to be a positive today, and there are so many things that were a positive back then but aren't seen to be a positive now. The world is different, times have changed, but at the same time, creatively, it just feels like that a lot of people in wrestling, I wouldn't say it's even just WWE, a lot of people seem to have run out of some ideas, because a lot of storylines seem to be rehashed or recycled. It would be great to see something completely twist it and change it up and come out of the block. And I think that would be the thing that would really mix things up and really bring people back in, because I think at the moment people think, since the times where we had those sort of superstars like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, they were true characters, true showmen. You had people like Triple H who could carry the workload of a good match as well, and really be that cerebral assassin. Today, you know, you've got Seth Rollins who, yeah, puts on a great match, but where's the star power? And arguably with Roman Reigns is the same thing. Braun Strowman had something that stood out, but they're booking him like Big Show, and we know Big Show, you know, as much as he will be seen as a legend within WWE and had his high moments, he's never really met that top peak that he could have done, because of the fact that you look at it and think to yourself that he was mismanaged through a lot of his career, and Braun Strowman is currently suffering the same fate. But I could go on that question all day, so I'm going to leave that one there for you there. But of course, guys, thank you so much for putting your questions in, as always, here on Ask SCW. It's really always good to get your questions in and to give feedback on them. If you have any answers to any of those questions, then please get involved in the comments below. Of course, as well, if you want to ask a question for the next episode of Ask SCW, then do get involved. And yeah, always leave the hashtag Ask SCW. I know then to include it on the next video. Thank you for watching, as always. Do enjoy your wrestling week, and like I say, there will be Bound for Glory predictions coming on the channel this week, and of course there'll be another Ask SCW as well, so you can keep an eye out for that. But thank you for watching as always. I'll see you next time here on YouTube. Please like, share and subscribe, and have yourself a good one. Take care.